A few weeks ago, I took a look at an updated IMOU security camera, the Cruiser 2, which was a huge update from their original roots when the company was called L'Change. I thought it was good, especially the connectivity speed on the Wi-Fi network. It's been one of the fastest Wi-Fi connected security cameras without a hub that I've ever tested. So I thought that their other cameras might be worth a look to see if the experience continues across the range. So I've gotten hold of 3 of their other cameras to do a quicker run through of. We've got the solar powered Cell PT, the Cell Go and the Cell 3C, which is so cheap I couldn't quite believe the price of it when I saw it. Now, to recap on the software before we take a look at these pieces of hardware, the app that the IMOU uses is simple enough to get to grips with. You're first met with a camera view, nothing super special, except for one particular feature that other systems don't have, and that's this little button at the very top. Pressing this single button actually plays all of the IMOU cameras at the same time. And you'll notice there that they connect really quickly, but there are some things that can affect the speed between the models, which I'll run through later on. But this play all feature is something that I wish all security systems would allow, but they just don't. IMOU seems to be one of the very few that actually have this, but I think it's a super integral part of the system. Quite often if a camera activates, it'll take me a brief period to actually check it from the notification. And by the time I've actually loaded up, whoever's triggered it is probably already in the house and rifling through my panty drawer. And with other systems, I wouldn't know unless I checked each camera one by one to see where the culprit has gone after that first original trigger. Well, with IMOU, one button press and I'll have located the trigger even if that individual has moved to a different camera view. So, repeating what I said in my Cruiser 2 review, this is a huge pat on the back for the devs of the IMOU app, and in its own right makes the IMOU system worth its weight in gold. But there are a few other standout features of the app. This, of course, isn't the only one. Another is the security report that it provides you with. This gives you a snapshot of the general activity statistics from the cameras, which is another feature that other systems just don't have, but would absolutely benefit from, because it's like a health overview of your security and allows a quick glanceable piece of information that's very easy to digest. And again, to repeat my thoughts from the Cruiser 2 review, the rest of the app is also really simple and friendly to use, bold text, big buttons, and everything seems to be a menu or less away from the home screen. And it's got loads of standard features that we've come to expect from smart security cameras, such as the ability to two-way talk, set detection zones, trigger audible alarms from the cameras. But that's a recap of the app for those that missed that previous episode. So now it's time to kind of take a look at the selection of other cameras we have today. Now, all of these are battery operated, which offers a ton of flexibility essentially over the hardwired Cruiser 2 we looked at last time. Hardwired has obviously got its benefits, of course, but I've always been a big fan of battery-operated systems for the added flexibility of being able to place them anywhere and the fact that you can put them up with less damage to your property. So let's start with the Cell PT, which is the most like the Cruiser 2 in both style and function. It's got an auto-tracking functionality so it can detect and follow movements, along with 2 large antennae which help create that speedy connection to your network. The biggest difference is the aforementioned internal battery, which in turn is charged via the absolutely ginormous solar panel that comes with it. Seriously, this is one of the biggest included solar panels that I've ever seen, so it's not going to be exactly inconspicuous when mounted to your house, but what it will do is ensure that your camera will always have power and will allow you to make sure that the camera charges itself if you've got it placed in a position that's inaccessible for you to access, or certainly in a more difficult to charge place for batteries. And the sheer size of this panel increases its solar efficiency, so even on mixed grey days it's going to generate some charge. How this will fare during the winter months I'm not so sure, but I can make some assumptions that it will fare much better than those with integrated solar panels, simply because it is so much bigger and you can position it independently. Now, in respect to cost, it's slightly more than the Cruiser 2, at $129 down to £99 when I last checked. This is an understandable increase from the Cruiser 2 with its included solar panel and internal battery capability, but it's still cheaper than competitors such as the Eufy S340, which comes in at around £170. Now next up, I thought we'd take a look at the Cell Go. This is one of the smallest cameras that IMOU do, and generally it seems like this is the one they'd recommend for using indoors. However, despite this, it's fully weatherproof, so it can be used as an outdoor camera too. But my real question for this one was, could it keep up with the bigger and more expensive Cruiser 2 and Cell PT? Now, it's got a few distinct spec differences, notably that this is completely stationary, and in terms of its design, it's quite different, featuring a large lens and PIR sensor for accurate motion detection on the front and a more flattened profile, which I think some people will prefer. It's perhaps not as obvious and is easier to blend in with its surroundings. It's got no spotlight, so it relies on its IR night vision, and unlike other cameras, it has 4GB of internal storage, but no SD card slots, so you're stuck with that internal memory. But in terms of its functionality, it seems to do a great job despite its smaller size, and offers generally an experience very similar to the larger models, just without the tracking and spotlights. This particular camera, though, has one more function. And it might very well be the first home security camera to include this feature, and that's a vlogging mode. This allows you to essentially take the camera with you, and when in vlog mode, you can press a button on the underside to start or stop recording. Sort of like an action camera style device like a GoPro.
This is a very novel idea, and although it's not going to be the best vlogging camera in the entire world, I do like the principle of it.
Of course, it means if you take it with you, it can't act as a security camera, but the idea is certainly there. It gives it a function beyond just being a security camera, which I've never seen from another brand security camera ever, and it could well be the very next big thing. Now, you can also use it for time lapses, so actually it does perform a pretty interesting function when it comes to content creation. Realistically, how much you'll use these functions, well, that all depends on the person. Me, probably not so much, but it's there, and that's the point. For me, it's all about the Cell Go's flexibility, which makes it a good device for that fact. It's perfect for scenarios where you might not need a permanent camera setup. I'll give you an example of where this has come in handy for me recently. My dog, unfortunately, has just had surgery, so whilst he's got a massive cone on his head, I need to keep an eye on him throughout the night to make sure he's fine. Now, we went on holiday recently, so I just grabbed the Cell Go and quickly placed it on a shelf in the room where he was in the holiday cottage, looking down at him, so I was able to essentially make sure he was fine without making any holes or permanent changes to the property I was in. Dropped it in, joined the Wi-Fi network, and off I went, which I think was pretty handy. And I was able to actually use it as a vlogging camera, although again, not so much. Now, the cost of the Cell Go is £45 down to £35 whilst I was writing this episode, which is excellent value. And I wanted to end this episode there by commending them on that value. So I was going to plan on doing this last, but hold on to your seats, because although that is some excellent value for a multifunctional security camera that can be used both indoor and out and as a vlogging camera, it doesn't actually steal the show. All of these cameras have been pretty solid, some great specs and good connectivity, although there is an asterisk here which I'll come back to in a little bit. But putting all of these cameras to one side, there was one that really stood out for me and one that I absolutely had to try, and the real reason for today's episode. The Cell 3C. Now, it's not because this has some secret feature. It has largely the exact same features as all of the other cameras within the system, and appearance-wise it's mostly similar to the Cell Go rather than the Cruiser 2 or Cell PT, but the defining difference makes this product quite intriguing, and that is the price. This is possibly the cheapest all-round Wi-Fi security camera with mid to high specs that I've come across, and by all-round I mean one that can work both indoors and outdoors and on your Wi-Fi network. And by cheapest, this is unreal value, because when I checked whilst writing this episode, this was just £34. That's crazy. It's even better when you consider the robust nature of the system. I just can't believe the price of this device. Now, I'm sure you're probably thinking something similar to how I thought when I found out the price. What's the catch? What specs are downgraded? How bad can the picture be? But in respect to its capabilities, it's just as good as their other cameras. If anything, it offers more than the Cell Go, despite being a smidgen cheaper. I had assumed that for that price, all we'd be getting is something like 1080p quality, but it shoots in 2K. And they've gone all out with the feature set. It's a stationary device, albeit, but with a large lens and PIR sensor on the front. It's also got a spotlight on the front along with IR LEDs, so it's capable of black and white and full color night vision, and thankfully has an SD card slot for larger storage. It uses the exact same app, so expect the exact same functionality, but from a hardware perspective, I cannot believe how much they've packed into this for a sub £35 camera. It's just unbelievable value. Now, I mentioned this in my review of the Cruiser 2 that IMOU have some extremely good value kit, but this just takes it to the next level. It offers so much value that I think it makes them not just a heavy hitter in the security camera niche, but with prices like that, they're fighting for the top spot. I still think that they've got some way to go with their subscription model before they can take the top spot for features. Don't get me wrong, their subscription model does give you access to a ton of important features such as AI detection on all of their cameras, even on those without onboard AI computing, which is certainly interesting. This AI allows you to essentially filter camera notifications of recordings by motion type, such as human, pet, or vehicle, and it gives you the ability to back all of the footage up as well to the cloud. But as you know, I'm not a huge fan of subscription plans, especially where you lose certain functionality if you don't subscribe. And the biggest feature here that's hidden behind the paywall in IMOU's case is that you essentially lose the ability, by not subscribing, to download the SD cardings remotely when not on your local network. You can still download them remotely from home without obviously having to remove the SD card, so you don't have to climb up a ladder and get it. But if you're external, then unfortunately you'll have to wait until you get home to be able to download them. A slightly frustrating quirk, that's for sure, but with the 3C, at least they've given themselves a bit of slack with the price being so low. Add the price of the subscription to the camera at £2.59 per month for the more advanced features, and I guess the price sort of balances out a bit if you account for year-on-year purchase of the subscription. But the price doesn't excuse the subscription, just sort of makes up for it somewhat. So I guess, echoing my thoughts from my previous IMOU episode, I'd love to see a more robust system without the need for subscription. I'd also love to see a hub-based system from IMOU too. Typically, a hub-based system forgoes subscription fees and allows a localized, focused experience connected to a camera hub. But that's not the only reason I want them to do something like that. I'd also like to see that because it can offer people generally better connectivity. Now, I know I've mentioned about how good the connectivity is between the cameras and the network, and that the speed that they load at is almost as fast as hardwire PoE systems. But here's the asterisk I mentioned earlier. This is all tested on my home network, and as a tech reviewer, you can bet that my network has the highest strength signal it possibly can throughout the entire property, with a full Wi-Fi 6 mesh system throughout everything and the garden. So I'm always going to have the best possible experience when it comes to router connected cameras. But depending on where you place these, the Wi-Fi signal strength, it could have an effect on how well these will perform, and again, depending on which camera you decide to use. Take the Cruiser 2 and the Cell PT, for example, which have large external antennae. Those are going to have a much better signal strength than the Cell Go and the Cell 3C, which have an internal antenna. So it's certainly something to consider when looking at Wi-Fi connected cameras. Certainly ask yourself how good your signal will be in the areas you want to put them before you buy one. That'll help determine which one of these will be the best to go for. But putting those points to one side, I have to say that even if they aren't the king of features out of the box, IMOU are stealing the show when it comes to value and flexibility. And it's like that across the range. I bet if you picked a camera, find the closest competing product from manufacturers like Arlo or Eufy, for example, who have similar subscription fees, you'll find that their nearest product is very nearly 250% more expensive, which is crazy. Not in every case, but as IMOU have so many different options, something for almost every situation, when comparing to similar competing camera, IMOU cameras always come out trumps for value. So my conclusion for IMOU cameras is this. If you're on a budget and looking for one of the most inexpensive systems that still offer a good amount of features for the price, but most importantly still offers quality that compares with products that are a lot more expensive, and perhaps if you're happy to sacrifice a few essential features if you don't want to subscribe to one of their plans, then IMOU is absolutely one of the best camera manufacturers to look at for the above reasons. What do you guys think? Does IMOU offer unbeatable value, or do you think they're slightly hindered by the subscription plans? Let us all know in the comments below so we can all have a good chin wag about it. And remember to check out the links below where I'll link to all of the cameras in today's episode. But other than that, guys, thank you very much for joining, and I'll see you back for another episode of STU'S Reviews soon.